My name is Santamaria, and I am a lead developer advocate at Dell Technologies. But the bigger thing is I'm one of the core organizers for DevOpsDays Austin. We just had our event 2 weeks ago. So I'm here, and it's a good start, and I'm happy to see all of you here. As Aaron mentioned, kind of the theme of DevOpsDays Kansas City this year is exploring where we've been and where we're going, how DevOps has changed in the past 15 years. And I want to start out with a very common phrase, and that's people over process over tools. You may have heard this phrase before, and you may have seen the visual version of it where you see people and then a line and then process and then a line and then tools, especially if you've ever seen John Willis talk, because he will have it everywhere. So, people over process over tools. What exactly does this mean? How does this really encapsulate DevOps itself? And it's always the classic thing, it's always a people problem in DevOps. No matter what we do, we have to solve the people problem first, then the processes that we need to do, then the tools. But what is DevOps? I'm going to give you my definition. DevOps is the idea that everyone from conception and ideation of a project or a product all the way out through development, maintenance, and obsolescence. Everyone is involved at the very beginning, talking together and communicating. If you might notice, it's not a tool. And I hate to pick on Azure. I'm sorry for the Microsoft people in the audience, but Azure DevOps, right? It's not a tool, it's not even a process, it's an idea. And unfortunately, because we've kind of muddied the waters over the past 15 years, we start to realize that we have all these hot takes. DevOps is dead. How many people have heard that phrase before? Okay, good. It has not infected this community just yet. There's only some people who have heard it. But all of these hot takes miss the original point, which is people over process over tools. DevOps can't be dead because it's an idea, and ideas don't die, they evolve. The COMS acronym was one of the first things that we all learned. And COMS, for those of you who don't know or maybe are new to this community, stands for culture, sometimes collaboration or communication, depending on who you're talking with. Automation, the shiny tool thing, it's what we all want to take a look at. Lean, which comes from lean manufacturing. Some of you may have heard of the 3 ways from Toyota. That's where that comes from. Measurement or metrics. So depending on who you're talking to and when, in which era we first heard it. And then sharing, which is where you go and share everything you've learned to try to do better. You might notice, though, that people bookend both sides of the acronym. Culture and communication, and sharing. People are the heart of DevOps. And now, as we think about things, we realize that DevOps is a lot about communication and psychological safety, because psychological safety and the communication that comes with it is what drives our innovation. It drives the faster release cycles that we're targeting, because without that, everyone slows down and tries to figure out what they're doing. In modern day surveys, I think one just came out 3 days ago, the biggest thing that engineering leaders talk about trying to solve in their organization are people problems. They talk about communication breakdowns. They talk about problems between teams, reaching out to other organizations inside of their organization. And then in a somewhat distant second is process, dealing with how do we bring new things to the company. Platform engineering, SRE work for people who are still new to that. And then Non-existent, if you look at some of these surveys, are tools. Because despite what we all might want to say, because we work at companies, what can I say? Tools are a dime a dozen. They don't quite matter if you have everything else figured out. You'll also find that the main reason people leave a company is because of the person that they're working for. Generally, we always hear that. People leave managers, not companies. Whether that's true or not is a different question. So that's why DevOps is still extremely relevant today, because it addresses people problems. So let's look at DevOps from people over process over tools. First up, people. It always starts with people. Cultural or organizational problems often block organizational changes. For example, the classic over the wall. So how many people here have read the Phoenix Project? Okay, some people are familiar, most people are familiar. It's okay if you haven't. The Phoenix Project kind of showed off this wall that we always talk about, siloed groups in an organization. And the wall was the lack of communication and the lack of transfer of ownership between them. So this is probably one of the biggest problems that we still see today. We find, though, that unlike just the classic version from the Phoenix Project, it isn't just between development and operations. We find it between product management and development, because they start out building something, and then over time they say, okay, we've gotten all the prerequisites, we've gotten all of our requirements, now I'm going to toss it over the wall to dev. Dev had no input. And then dev builds something, we're going to toss it over the wall to ops. Maybe security gets in there. This is the classic people problem, all of the silos that we're dealing with over time. And some people think that to solve this, you make one person a generalist, and they own everything. That causes another problem, which we'll address in a minute, but that wasn't the point. Teams are supposed to be support structures for specialists, not silos within an organization. Specialists need to work with other specialists to build out what we need to build for all of our products. Next up, bottlenecks. This is a very common problem, especially if you look at maybe approvals to move from dev to staging to QA to prod or something like that. Those bottlenecks really are people problems. And often, one way people try to do this is to create another team, a DevOps engineering team, an SRE team, a platform engineering team, because they think that's the way to solve the problem. All it does is create new silos. If anybody here is familiar with team topologies, it's adding more to the Venn diagram. And so instead, it's better to open up that group and consider how to get everyone working together to deal with the people problem. Then there is the single overworked engineer or engineering team. This is your Brent. So Phoenix Project, Brent. The thing is that over time, while we have learned about Brent, we still have Brent. We're trying to fix it, and we still have the same problem because we haven't fixed the people problem underneath. Nowadays, we hear about chaos engineering. Chaos engineering is trying to fix the Brent problem by identifying where Brent is and how to make it easier for Brent not to be Brent. I'm sorry for anyone in the audience called Brent. Now let's look at process. Once you start to understand your people problems, we can explore process problems. But if you don't fix those people problems, remember, any process changes you try to do still will have the same old people and the same old problems. CI/CD, probably one of the most common processes we hear about because, of course, for the longest time, we've assumed that CI/CD is DevOps, or sometimes the vendors are the ones who tell us that. CI/CD is continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, for anybody who's not familiar. We might think that adding CI/CD and kind of moving towards this agile process will make us move faster. We'll get that innovation, we'll deal with the psychological safety problem. But there can be underlying people failures that will prevent this from actually working. That intra-team bottleneck with approval processes, just because you add a little bit of automation around it, where there's a gate where they get a button maybe to push, there's still someone pushing the button. And there's still somebody building the pipeline who has to then put in the approval processes. Even if you have it automated, there's still a group out there who has to do something. And maybe they're overworked. Maybe they don't know what they're doing. There's going to be a bottleneck. So you have to address that first in your organization. Next up, infrastructure automation. So this is your infrastructure as code. And the idea started originally with groups like Chef and Puppet and have moved through to Terraform and Pulumi and Ansible, things like that. This is your classic cattle versus pets discussion. So as we've evolved over time to move from on-prem to hybrid to cloud, back again, maybe you didn't move off on-prem, but you tried to do all these things, there's still some underlying people problems. And that might be that you're trying to fix not having enough people on your operational team to make the infrastructure work. Or you get shadow IT, which is people avoiding the process of procuring any of this hardware that they need. So they don't want to do the infrastructure automation, so they don't follow the process to get it, and they just, their director says, oh, you know what, we're just going to get a budget over on AWS, GCP Azure, name your cloud, and think that that's good enough. It's a people problem. People don't trust the process. So this is another, or people don't trust the people behind the process. There we go. I knew I would get there eventually. So that's that one. Once we've talked about all these processes, though, and kind of evaluated the problem itself, make sure we've solved the people problem, we can finally talk about tooling. Now, I've said it before, tools are a dime a dozen. They're shiny. If you figured out your people problems, and you figured out then the process problems after the people problems, you can switch out tools all you want. How many people here have ever had that, manager who has chased the shiny tool before? Yeah. You can admit it. This is a safe space, I promise. We all chase the shiny tool. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'll build something and then find out about some new tool and think, I could learn something from that. I want to go do it, right? If your people problems have been addressed and your process problems have been addressed, you can go chase the shiny tool. That's fine. Just maybe don't refactor every week. I think your boss might catch on. Let's pick one of the more common ones again. One of the classics is choosing a CI/CD tool. Whether you use Jenkins, GitHub Actions, Hudson. Who wanted to tease me about Hudson before? Someone did. Yes, I see your hands up in the back. Choosing your CI/CD tool should be fairly easy if you've gotten the process figured out. But obviously, just shoving a tool at it doesn't fix the problem. So a process failure might be never addressing the move from waterfall to agile. Maybe your director, manager, whoever, heard about this agile thing. Hopefully they've heard about it by now, but you never know. Maybe they've heard about this agile thing and they think, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to release more often. But they don't actually, move away from the waterfall problem. They don't move away from that process. So they shove it in and they shove on the tool and they say it should fix everything. But it doesn't. And then someone gets blamed. And then we have no psychological safety. We deal with the people problem that's underneath there. And no innovation happens. It works. People over process over tools. Another underlying people failure here is that maybe you're trying to add this kind of process, but the infrastructure team has no support to continue to make this happen. So suddenly, products are getting pushed to prod all the time, and there's not enough infrastructure. There's not enough security. There's not enough quality assurance. These teams might not have support. And so that's an underlying people problem right there. Now we move to something a little more modern, adopting platforms as a service. How many people here are thinking about or considering or have already moved to platform engineering world? It's okay. Okay, so some people have. This is kind of the big common one you hear, especially in cloud-native circles. Backstage. I'm sorry if you have to work with Backstage. Node is my enemy. Other than Jenkins. It's Jenkins and Node. They fight each other all the time. But if you're moving to Backstage, maybe your company heard about this at a workshop and said, you know what, we're going to do this. We're going to make a self-service platform for all of these developers to just push to. And hey, guess what? Sysadmin, DevOps engineer, SRE, you're now called platform engineering, right? We're going to use platform engineering because we use Backstage. That's a pretty common one. But maybe you're still requiring centralized approvals to get all that hardware. It's a process problem. Underneath it, there's more people problems. A new team to fix an old cultural problem. This is team topologies. This is the idea that if I rename the team, it's going to magically fix the problem. You need to have the support structures in place to do that. You need to have the trust between teams, because maybe ops, and maybe some of us have done this, ops thinks that dev is just a bunch of cowboys who want to just go deploy whatever they want. And then ops is viewed as the old stick in the mud who just slows everyone down. And then security, I'm sorry, you're often viewed as the gatekeeper to everything. QA too sometimes. But that's a people problem. There's a lack of trust in your organization that you have to break down and you have to figure out. So let's look at what this looks like in real life in some transformations. But remember, transformations start and end with people. And these are DevOps transformations, but it's the idea. In the past, and I'm going to put that in big quotes, past, we had the classic Phoenix project DevOps transformation where dev and ops speaking together. This is the Flickr talk that Aaron was mentioning. Dev and ops are working together from the very beginning to build something bigger than themselves. So they looked at the culture and they started to think about how they can fix the trust in their organization. So they started changing some things. They then automated all of the deployment processes going through. They used the 3 ways and value stream mapping to lean up their work. Then they got metrics from that and analyzed it. And then finally, they shared the information that they learned with the rest of their organization. Classic transformation following the CALMS acronym. In the present day, maybe you have platform engineering. And so again, we see the same process going on. There's a cultural shift, thinking about suddenly our infrastructure becomes a product that dev gets to use, and dev is the internal customer. We then start to automate the building of that infrastructure with the cattle mentality, where if a piece of infrastructure is malfunctioning or needs to update or whatever, we just tear it down and put something new in its place. It's always replaceable. Then we start looking again at value stream mapping. We start digging down into how we can improve. And we try to lean up our work, make it faster, make it easier to do. We use metrics to understand how well we're doing. Maybe we start taking NPS scores, or what's called Net Promoter Score, which is a very common measurement that marketing might use or sales might use to understand how well their customers like what they're doing. But instead, we're applying that inside the company to get some metrics. And then we share information. We do better with our platforms. Same transformation, different actual idea. And then let's think about a future. I'm sure you all are a little tired of generative AI. But let's imagine a world where maybe AI is in the middle of all this and it's doing a little bit of observability. I've heard AI ops, and I am sorry, I did not invent that one. But AI ops, let's imagine that, okay, we realize that we need to do better with our observability because we just have too much data. We don't know what to do. So we add in a bit of culture where we explore the AI world and we say, okay, maybe AI can help us. Machine learning. I'm just going to say machine learning because AI drives me up a wall. Yes, please clap at that because it just gets me. But machine learning. So we do a little bit of machine learning on our observability stack, and then we automate it. We send all of this data automatically to a program that analyzes and starts to understand the traces that we're generating, the data, et cetera. And we do a little bit of value stream mapping, but maybe generative AI is doing it for us. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen what this future looks like yet. But we get a bunch of data out of it, and instead this time someone else has analyzed it for us. I shouldn't say someone else. A machine has analyzed it for us and gotten some data out of it for us. Then we take that learning that we got, we share it with other people, and we improve how we're doing. Maybe this is the future. Maybe not. But why is this all the same thing? It's the same picture. Organizational systems like companies change in the same cascade. No matter whether it's changing from mainframe to containers, waterfall to agile, centralized to autonomous team structures, it doesn't matter. We change the same way. We always ship based on our org chart, which is something called Conway's Law. The tech itself doesn't matter as much as the people do. And the people haven't really changed. We're still here. That is why the heart of DevOps is people. And that's why this phrase still matters. People over process over tools. We can replace the tools as long as the processes make sense, and we can adjust processes as long as we've thought about the underlying people problems. But we can't change the people problems. And we have to do that before we address anything else with process and tooling. So this phrase encapsulates the meaning of DevOps. Then, now, and into the future. So whether you realize it or not, DevOps as an idea is not dead. It can't be. It's only evolved. Thank you so much.